Welcome all. You are joining us today for a webinar on certification process for literacy instruction in teacher preparation programs. This is being recorded on June 2024, and it will be posted on our literacy and reading instruction webpage. Today, our presenters are myself, Roxanne Perdue. I'm a consultant in the Professional Services Division. I'm part of the accreditation team and part of the literacy team here at the Commission.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Larson, and I'm a consultant in the Professional Services Division. I'm also a member of the literacy team and also on the accreditation team.
So we're going to start literacy instruction and teacher preparation programs. The important thing to note is that the information we're covering today comes from requirements of Senate Bill 488, also known as SB 488. And it's important to note that that bill was passed in 2021. Bill numbers are reused in the legislature. So if you just type in Senate Bill 488, if you were doing a search, for example, you wouldn't pull up the correct Senate bill necessarily. But you'll see that we have a hyperlink on this slide. Anything that's hyperlinked on these slides will be part of our references posted along with this recorded webinar at the end of the session. So SB 488 required the Commission to develop literacy standards for the preparation of teaching candidates and their corresponding teacher performance expectations, also known as TPEs. It's important to know that SB 48 requires evidence-based means of teaching foundational reading skills, which includes print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics and word recognition, fluency. All of these are a primary focus of SB 48 and the education code that came out of that bill. Tiered supports for pupils, including those with reading difficulties, English learners, and those with exceptional needs are included as part of the bill. And in our standards, what we focused on with the tiered supports were multi-tiered systems of support, also known as MTSS in California. MTSS provides a basis for how educators can work together to ensure equitable access and opportunities for all students to achieve in the Common Core state standards, which literacy is a part of. In addition to that, we focus on ongoing diagnostic techniques and early intervention. So when thinking about diagnostic techniques and assessments, they help our teachers address the variability in student literacy learning and the early intervention for students with reading difficulties, including but not limited to those students at risk or identified with dyslexia. And more on that later. It's important that your program is aligned with the State Board of Education adopted ELA/ELD framework. That's the English Language Arts, English Language Development Framework. That was adopted by the State Board of Education back in 2014, and it's still in use today. One of the co-authors of the framework is also one of the co-authors of the standards that the literacy work group designed that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So how do you know you're aligned with the framework? Well, if you're aligned with the standards and the TPEs that we are discussing today, those are aligned with the framework. So you'll be on target. What's very important is that your program incorporate the California dyslexia guidelines, and it needs to be part of your teacher preparation program. So you need to have a really heavy emphasis because the statute from SB 488 emphasizes incorporation over alignment for the California dyslexia guidelines. There's multiple ways you can approach that. One way would be to have it be a required reading for a course, for example, or across courses and lessons. Another way, for example, could be the UCCSU Collaborative for Neurodiversity and Learning offers 3 free e-learning modules that were designed primarily for both faculty and candidates in teacher preparation programs, and they are aligned with the California dyslexia guidelines. So they're free, they're e-learning modules, and they were designed specifically for teacher preparation programs in mind. Not exclusively for them, but with them in mind. Approach it. There's many options for incorporating the guidelines, but you do want to make it an emphasis of your program. The program needs to be organized, systematic, explicit, and direct with their foundational skills instruction and practice in connected text. There's a strong literature language comprehension component with a balance of oral and written language in the standards, and integrated methods of teaching language arts in both multiple subject and education specialist credentials. So some other requirements that come with the bill is that the commission must certify all programs by July 1st, 2025. We'll talk more about that as we move through this presentation. And we want to have development and implementation of a literacy instruction performance assessment also by July 1st, 2025. So as of June 30th, 2025, RECA ends as the primary assessment, and as of July 1st, 2025, Literacy Instruction Performance Assessment, that some call the LPA, begins.
So what should programs be doing right now? They should be looking at their programs and determining what needs to be done within their literacy courses and other courses to meet these new requirements, and working within your institutional processes, bureaucratic processes, to ensure that those are in place by the deadline of July 1st, 2024. So that's kind of the big picture. What we'll be doing through the rest of the presentation is diving into the nuts and bolts of this certification process so that you understand exactly what the commission will be looking for as you prepare your submissions. So which programs are included in the certification process for literacy instruction? Just a reminder that for each program that you're submitting, you need to ensure that all pathways for each of those programs are addressed in whatever you submit. So that would be if you have student teaching, intern, teacher residency, and so on. If those pathways have different coursework that is required and different courses that meet the certification process, you need to include each pathway as a separate submission. The programs we'll be looking for submissions from are multiple subject, education specialist, including mild to moderate support needs, extensive support needs, visual impairments, deaf and hard of hearing, early childhood special education, and also PK3 early childhood education. Please note that at this time, we are not asking single subject programs to submit for certification. However, those programs must be aligned with the new Literacy Standard 7 and TPEs for accreditation, but again, are not subject to the certification process that we are talking about today. So some important timelines to keep in mind. You can see some of the things that have happened in the past regarding the certification process. What we're focusing on right now is that the April 26th date, which obviously has already passed, we were starting to accept documentation from programs for certification. So the forms are open online. Your program, if they're ready to submit, can go ahead and submit. July 1st is really one of the main key important dates here. And per this statute, all commission approved programs, multiple subjects, single subject ed specialist, and PK3 teacher prep programs must be aligned to the new Literacy Instruction Standard 7 and TPEs. So although you may submit your certification documentation after July 1st, any candidate starting a program at your institution as of July 1st must be in a program that meets the new standards. So that is a really important date to keep in mind. The next very important date is October 4th, 2024. And this is the deadline for all applicable programs to submit that documentation for literacy certification. And that is the date. We are not accepting late submissions. And if you don't submit by that date, then we will have to have, a one-on-one conversation and see what the implications may be for your program. So it is very, very important to have that October 4th date on your calendars and know that you must submit by that date. During the 2024-2025 academic year, we will have teams of reviewers looking at all the documents that have been submitted for certification and providing feedback to programs. And then per the statute by July 1st, 2025, all programs must be certified and ready to go, and the literacy performance assessment becomes operational. In this next section of the presentation, we are going to walk through the various steps involved in that literacy certification process.
Thank you, Lynn. So we have had an overview in general over SB 488, but our primary purpose today is to have an overview of the literacy certification process. So you know how to complete the forms and how to submit your documentation and your evidence. So certification follows the legislative mandate in asking for documentation that selected components of the TPEs in Domain 7. And so what do we mean by selected components? So the first thing you'll notice as you go through the templates that are available in our program sponsor alert, our PSA 2401 in the is listed. And they're not in order necessarily. They go in groupings of what is primarily emphasized in the legislative statute. And not all of them are specifically called out in statute. So we made certification those pieces that are specifically identified in statute. Information submitted for certification is closely tied to our accreditation system. So it's really common to what you're used to submitting for preconditions, common standards, and program standards. Those templates that you're used to in program standards for program review, that I, P, and A that introduce, practice, and assess, the templates that you have for a matrix, all of that is going to be very familiar to you as you go through this certification process because it is part of our accreditation system. Because what we're looking at is our new standards and our new TPEs and thinking about how we can provide evidence and documentation to show that our programs are aligned with them. Institutions will create a separate tab with that thought in mind on their accreditation website, and they'll label it specifically for literacy certification. So where do you post this for us to look? On your accreditation website. Programs should provide evidentiary links for each introduce, practice, and assess. For the foundational skills elements, they are separated out. Each element is made separate on the template for that program. And it's done that way because each foundational skill has to be addressed and linked to an assignment or assessment within your course syllabus or course syllabi, depending on how many courses those IPs and As are found across. And the assignment or assessments that provide candidates with a choice of choosing a foundational skills, while not prohibited, they are problematic because there's a need for the evidence to be demonstrated that every foundational skill has been introduced, every foundational skill has been practiced, and every foundational skill has been assessed. 7.5 is where you'll find the foundational skills. So TPE 7.5 is where you will find each of the foundational skills, and we've separated those elements out for you on the template. So when we talk about providing evidence and evidentiary links for I, P, and A, we want to caution you to submit no more than 4 of your best examples. So no more than 4 links of evidence for the I, and then the P, and then the A. Does that mean you have to submit 4 examples? No, you could submit 1 example. What we encourage you to do is limit yourself to your 4 best examples though. If you have multiple examples of a concept being introduced or practiced or assessed, you want to provide your 4 best examples because it's not reasonable for the reviewers to look at more than that as they're completing their review of your program. So put your best foot forward, pick your best 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 for each I, P, and A. There's a foundational skills white paper from the California Department of Education, and it's an excellent resource on foundational skills. It's also referenced within the framework, the ELA ELD framework that we talked about earlier. And we'll include a link to that foundational skills white paper in our references that we're including with this recorded webcast.
So let's dig a bit into PSA 2401 and the requirements for certification that can be found in this very important document. Definitely recommend downloading a copy and having it available as it walks you through every step for what is required for certification. So the PSA contains an overview of the requirements, the key provisions, and links to important resources. Additional questions posed and answers given during certification office hours can be found on our reading and literacy instruction website. And we really encourage you to attend office hours. There have been some excellent questions, some excellent dialogue that goes on during those office hours. And what we do after we look at the recording, we capture all the questions and put the answers on our website. So come to office hours and then also be sure to review very carefully all of the questions and answers on that posting. Appendix A in the PSA provides general information on the certification process and anticipated key questions with responses. So there's two places you can go for questions and answers, our Q&A document and also Appendix A in the PSA 2401. Moving on to Appendix B. All applicable credential programs must respond to the requirements in Appendix B. And as it mentions in the PSA, the URL for the institution's accreditation website must be submitted when you go to that SB 488 certification submission form. And that form is also linked in the PSA. Now, Appendix B has a few different parts to it, so it's very important that you pay attention to what each section requires. Part 1 is providing contact information and credential programs addressed, the pathways for those programs, and then some important affirmation statements that have to be attended to. Part 2 is an overview of the required courses for literacy instruction and the process for program revisions for each pathway. Part 3 asks you to talk about how you prepare candidates to understand and teach foundational skills. Part 4 addresses program inclusion of literature, language, and comprehension. And Part 5 ensures candidates are well prepared to understand and implement diagnostic and early intervention techniques. So let's take a quick look at the PSA and we can show you exactly what this information looks like. So here is the Appendix A that we were speaking about, provides an overview, talks about what are the new requirements, the different standard elements and the corresponding TPEs. And then I'm going to kind of scroll quickly, so I apologize for that, but you can see all the questions and answers that are already embedded within the PSA. So again, please carefully look through all of this information before you start your work. And then here's Appendix B, which I just talked about, the different sections, and a link to that certification submission form where you will send us the information we asked for and also the URL to your accreditation website that has the specific link for this certification information that we're asking for. So Part 1, like I mentioned, is general information to be provided by all programs, your institution name, your dean or director of teacher ed, primary contacts, and so on. And then here's that affirmation, those affirmation statements that I mentioned as well. Part 2, we have a table template for you. Again, we want all required courses for each pathway in your program where literacy instruction is the primary coursework focus. You can also list other courses that have literacy within them, but may not be the literacy course or courses that your candidates take. And so we've given you a sample table. Again, this is just a sample showing what it might look like for multiple subjects that have multiple subjects program that has multiple pathways. If you have ed specialist and so on, you would include all of the ed specialist programs on this table as well. Again, this is just an example showing what it might look like for multiple subjects. There's also a sample table for Part 2.2. And then you can see there are some narrative responses here that we ask for the rest of the section 2 as well. Part 3 is preparing candidates to understand and teach foundational skills. And again, it lines out for you section by section what exactly we're looking for in each part of 3. And the same thing for 4. It gives you step by step the different pieces of information that we're asking for in section 4. And then section 5, the same thing. We've lined it out exactly for you what we're asking for in each section. After Appendix B, we have Appendix C, which is the TPE tables for preliminary multiple subject and preliminary education specialist for both the mild to moderate and extensive support needs. Preliminary early childhood special education has their own appendix. Please note that multiple subjects and mild mod and extensive support needs complete pages 20 through 25 of our PSA, and mild, moderate, and extensive support needs also need to complete page 26. So please don't forget for your ed specialist programs to also complete page 26. Appendix D are the TPE tables for the preliminary education specialist early childhood special education program. Appendix E are TPE tables for preliminary ed specialist visual impairments. And Appendix F are the TPE tables for preliminary ed specialist deaf and hard of hearing. Please note the tables are not available in this PSA for PK3 early childhood education specialist instruction credential, as these are not yet operational. And so they will submit their information as part of their initial program approval process. And we do anticipate that templates will be available for this in the early fall. So some general suggestions as you start to prepare your submissions. And Roxanne talked about this one already, but just to reiterate, we really would like you to focus on your best and clearest examples for each I, P, and A. So try to submit no more than 4 I's, P's, and A's for each TPE element. So as you go to your tables here, and we're asking you to provide us links for where print concepts, including letters of the alphabet, for example, are introduced, practiced, and assessed, we would like to see no more than 4 I's, 4 P's, and 4 A's. If you feel like you have to go above 4, that's fine. We're not going to reject your submission, but think of the work of the review teams and the number of links and things they're going to have to look at. And we found that if, the more you submit doesn't necessarily make your case clearer. So try to focus on those clearest and best examples for each I, P, and A. We really encourage you to use the language of the TP element in your linked evidence. So, for example, print concepts, including letters of the alphabet, if you're introducing that concept, for example, by having them read a chapter in the Tompkins text, for example, which is a commonly used textbook, we would encourage you to use the verbiage, print concepts, including letters of the alphabet, in the link. So if a reader would click on the I for this, it would lead to the chapter in the Tompkins text, and you would notate print concepts, including letters of the alphabet, are addressed in that chapter. This just makes it crystal clear that your institution is addressing this particular TP element in its fullest. We also encourage you to use bookmarks to provide clear links to your evidence. So when a reader clicks on something, if they're, it's on a page, that it goes directly to that piece of evidence, and bookmark it if it's on the middle of the page, top or the bottom, and so on. We also encourage programs to use annotations to provide additional information as needed. For one example, if a book chapter is used to show evidence for an element, but the book chapter title does not clearly address that element, it would be very helpful to provide an annotation, either a comment or something about where that element is covered in the chapter. Going back to our print concepts example, if print concepts are addressed in pages 25 through 30 in the book chapter, it would be very helpful to notate that through an annotation or a comment on your document. Another example, if an assignment is used to show evidence for an element, be sure the assignment is described sufficiently to provide clear evidence for that element. So just saying that they have to do a lesson plan doesn't clearly provide evidence that they're addressing, for example, print concepts. So please provide assignment descriptions and details sufficient enough so that a reviewer can make a determination that, yes, that concept is being addressed sufficiently. There are a few other submission suggestions that are linked in our Q&A document. So we're not going to go through all of those today, but again, please go through those Q&A documents, both in the PSA and on our website. They provide some excellent information and suggestions that we've discussed during our office hours.
Okay, so some more tips and key questions. The commission has an actual email address specifically for SB 488 certification questions, and it's titled conveniently SB 488 certification at ctc.ca.gov. You can find this email address under contacts on our literacy and reading instruction webpage. You can also find it in our references that we'll have included with this PowerPoint. So the commission has to account for all relevant programs at your institution, as well as all the different pathways for each program. So do you have to submit a separate appendix for each program and for each pathway within that program? Well, it depends. First, decide how much commonality there is between the different programs and pathways. Are they using the same coursework? If they're using the same coursework, they could be submitted together in one document. So for example, Appendix C covers both multiple subject and ed specialist mild, moderate support needs and extensive support needs. If your candidates for all of your pathways, for all three programs, are all taking the same literacy coursework that covers all of your content, then you are able to have all of those within one appendix submitted as one. You would want to be very clear that at the top, what programs and pathways are being addressed in that appendix so that it's clear to the reviewer and for your evidence what is being addressed for those programs and pathways. If, however, your interns, for example, in your multiple subject program are taking different course than literacy course than perhaps your traditional student teaching pathway, that would be two separate submissions then of that Appendix C. If your ed specialists are taking different courses than your multiple subject candidates, that would once again be two separate submissions of Appendix C. Just be very clear to us what you're doing so it's evident to the reviewer and the commission what you're intending with that submitted document. Make sure the information contained in the link you're connecting to for the TPE is clear and explicit. Don't assume that the reviewers will understand the connection to the TPE, as Lynn said. Using the language of the TPE is always helpful. Annotating, if necessary, is also helpful. I know you're used to us saying in program review, evidence, show, don't tell. And also okay to have a little bit of narrative in this one so that you're very explicit where the reviewer can find that information in the link. Another encouraging thing, and it doesn't mention it here on tips and keys, key questions, but probably I would say the number one problem we have with submission, both in program review, preconditions, and common standards, is those evidentiary links are sometimes not effectively working when they come to an outside source. So perhaps they work for you when you're on your internal system for your institution, but when they come to the reviewer or the commission staff to look at and open the link, we get errors. And then the submission has to come back to you and you have to work on your links again. So we highly recommend that you have your links checked outside of your institution by a friend or by yourself at your home computer, not while on your institution system, to make sure that they're accessible by outside sources. Reviewers need to look for every skill and content knowledge that's listed in the identified TPEs. Again, be explicit. If your syllabi do not make things explicit and you need to explain, you may annotate, as I said, you may provide some narrative. That's another option, but do not link to the top of a syllabus. As if a TP is covered in a syllabus, linking to the top where it has maybe the objectives is not sufficient. You need to link to that assignment. You need to link to that assessment. You need to link to that lecture or reading or whatever you do for introduction. It needs to go to the exact place in the syllabus where that information is found. Be judicious about the use of your links in your syllabi. Remember, it's supposed to be telling a story about how your program is aligning with the identified TPEs. So the impetus for SB 48 is a concern about teacher candidates not getting sufficient instruction in teaching foundational skills specifically. Both direct, explicit, and systematic instruction will be looked for, and to effectively provide intervention for learners with dyslexia and other reading challenges. Part of the process and what is specified in the language of the standards, it talks about students at risk for dyslexia and students who are identified and later diagnosed with dyslexia. So part of the process for your candidates will be identifying those students who are at risk for dyslexia. They do not make the actual diagnosis. The standard does not call for that. So you will need to find, there are by the California Department of Education and the State Board of Education's approving by a group of experts, a list of diagnostic tools and assessments that may be used for determining students who might be at risk for dyslexia, for referral, and for your support, and work together through diagnostic techniques and interventions to help support those students who might be at risk for dyslexia, or also for other reading challenges. So you'll need to identify those as a program and find the ones that you'll be using to teach your candidates how to use those instruments. SB 48 and the new literacy standard and TPEs include attention to both coursework and clinical practice. Ask whether the literacy instruction in your program will result in your candidates being sufficiently prepared to teach literacy on day one as a novice teacher. While not prescribed, the new standards may realistically require more than one course in literacy instruction. The content is very specific, it's very focused, and there is a lot of it. Having it contained all in one course would be very difficult to have the sufficient depth and breadth necessary to have that teacher ready on day one to teach literacy. So you want to really think carefully about whether more than one course will be needed to do those I's, P's, and A's of all of the TPEs addressed within the program. So remember, certification is pulling out some specific ones to look at, but when you are aligned as July 1st, 2024, all of the TPEs must be addressed. The standards must build the whole program. And when there's confusion or doubt about what's in the template about the TPEs, go back to the TPE and standard document. Read as a grounding resource those standards. Go back to the language of the TPE. There are footnotes there for you that provide additional information, additional references. There's a resource guide available on our website, the Literacy and Reading Instruction website, and it provides you additional resources that you can use when designing your coursework. So some other key topics that are addressed in certification office hours, that Q&A document Lynn mentioned. So for every office hours that we have, we take the questions that are asked and the answers that are provided, and we put them in a Q&A document, and we continue to add to that Q&A document, and it's updated every single time we have another office hours. And you'll know when it's updated because if you signed up for the PSDE news, you'll get a notice letting you know that that document has been updated. So we encourage you to sign up for the PSDE news if you haven't yet. But if you have, That comes out every Friday afternoon, somewhere around 3 p.m., and it'll let you know if we've updated that Q&A again. But you're also welcome to go to that literacy and reading instruction webpage, go down to certification and the Q&A document at the bottom, following the next office hour links. And for yourself, you can check through and see if anything's been added to the document. Information is available about timelines and deadlines within the Q&A. We talked about submission guidance, but the format, the credential pathways, that level of detail needed that we talked about earlier, linking documents, tips on linking documents, MOUs. There have been several questions about the MOUs, information about programs in the green cohort, provisional site visits, and the IIA process, that initial institutional approval. This document has been updated so far completely through our current office hour session, so check back often. And also look for our next Q&A office hour, our next office hours, excuse me. The link to them are provided for through June, the end of June. We have 2 more in June, and then we'll be updating and showing links for July and August and September soon. So what are some other resources? We talked about the Commission's Literacy and Reading Instruction website quite a few times. How can you get there if you don't happen to have the link? So you go to the Commission's main homepage, and I'm hoping you've all been there before. That's ctc.ca.gov. So you're there on our homepage, and there's a search engine up in the right-hand corner. Just type literacy and reading, and the first link that comes up will be that literacy and reading instruction website. So if you don't have the link handy and you didn't put it in your favorites, though I encourage you to do so, you'll be able to access it that way. The very first thing provided in that literacy instruction website, other than asking for volunteers that Lynn will talk about, is a link to SB 488. So if you don't want to try and do a search for it, which, by the way, I tried doing myself recently just to see how difficult it was. And trust me, you want to go ahead and use our link to go directly to the bill if you want to read the actual bill language. Remember that bill language then puts itself into the education code language, and that's what we base everything on, is the actual education code. There's background information on the bill, key features on the new standards and TPEs. Links to the new standards and TPEs for each program are provided. So if you want a quick link to finding the standards and TPEs for your program, they're available there on that website. That resource guide I mentioned earlier, which gives so many different resources for each, down to the page number that you can find it on, for each TPE element, for each standard. There are resources available that help guide you to where you can find information, further information about something that is provided in a standard or TPE. PSA 2401 is available as a link, and the submission to the appendices are available. Information about certification office hours I mentioned are there. So you scroll down to certification, you'll find that office hours are there. It'll have the days and times of the office hours and the Zoom link for you there. The next 2 office hours are June 11th from 10 to 11. That's a Tuesday. And Wednesday, June 26th from 10 to 11. We tend to have them always from 10 to 11, but the days vary because we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity based on their availability to attend. So we try to mix it up a little bit. And then once again, at the bottom of that certification is that office hours Q&A. And Lynn stressed, and I'm going to stress, that you go through and read that document even before you attend the next office hours, because it's going to generate, it'll give you some answers in advance, but it's going to generate more questions for you as you think about your specific program and how it relates to those questions. Then I had mentioned earlier an email address. Email us directly with questions. You don't have to wait for office hours. If you have a question specific to your program, you can email us those questions at SB488 certification at ctc.ca.gov. And in our resources section, that is under contacts. So let's talk some more about certification resources. There's even more. So SB 488 required that the new literacy standards and TPEs incorporate the California dyslexia guidelines In our website, that literacy and reading instruction website, we have a link directly to the California Dyslexia Guidelines. We talked a little bit about free virtual professional learning opportunities. We talked about the UC CSU Collaborative for Neurodiversity and Learning and how they offer those free e-learning modules. There's a total of 3 modules right now, though I know that they're developing more perhaps. But the free 3 that they have right now are specific to um, dyslexia and literacy. Um, they do align with the California Dyslexia Guidelines. The collaborative also provides resources for literacy development that allow an individual to select a topic of interest in literacy. There's also the California Dyslexia Initiative. The Sacramento County Office of Education is a project lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative and is working in partnership with the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, Dyslexia Center to build capacity and resources across California's education systems to address the needs of struggling readers and students with dyslexia. It's important to remember that the UC CSU Collaborative free e-learning modules were developed with teacher preparation programs in mind, with faculty professional learning in mind, with candidate learning in mind. The California Dyslexia Initiative has also many, many free opportunities to learn more about dyslexia and guest speakers from different universities. The California Dyslexia Initiative has a wider range of focus, including those in service teachers right now, as well as parents and community members, and teacher preparation programs.
And last but not least, we are asking for folks to sign up to be reviewers for these certification submissions. As you can imagine, for all the programs that need to be certified across the state of California and for the scope of information that's being submitted, we are going to need reviewers for the 200 plus programs that we'll be submitting for certification. Interested and qualified individuals should apply at the link on our literacy and reading instruction website. There's a link right at the top in big bold letters because we are seeking out those reviewers right now. So please, if you are interested and qualified, we would love to see you be a part of this process. It will definitely be a learning process. And we will provide any training. You don't have to be BIR certified to participate in this, as we will provide all the training you will need to be a qualified reviewer for these certification submissions. So Roxanne and I would like to thank you for watching this webinar today. We hope it has been informative. Again, we encourage you to take advantage of all the resources that are available on our website and to please attend office hours. It really has been a very beneficial opportunity for those who have attended. It has resulted in a very robust set of questions and answers on that document, and we would love for you to come and be a part of that process. So thank you so much.